Shalom, you're watching, oops, I just knocked out Mark's camera. Shalom, you're watching Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. This morning, I am joined by Mark Finkelstein in our studio, and little technical problems here in the studio. And Mark and I will be joined later in a show by Yashar Vasef from the UN Association of Iowa, who will join us to talk about what's going on in Iran politically and the idea of the nuclear program in Iran and possibilities of war with Iran. Yashar is a friend of Mark and mine. He's the executive director of the UN Association of Iowa, and we have worked with him on a number of things, most notably our work with Sudan. This week, the world in 5 minutes, the biggest problems the biggest issues that are going on in the world right now are not topics that we would normally handle on this show. In fact, the biggest issue by far going on foreign policy-wise is in Southeast Asia and involves North Korea. Now, where we normally encounter North Korea on this show is with them shipping technology to nations in the Middle East. North Korea works with Iran. North Korea also has helped Syria with its nuclear weapons program. But we don't normally talk about conflicts in Southeast Asia. And here, the saber rattling, or really the nuclear weapons rattling going on by North Korea right now, is fairly frightening. And the United States is having to respond fairly forcefully to it, sending military assets to the region, putting military assets on alert. The government in North Korea is led by a fairly new leader, Kim Jong-un, who is the son of the former dictator of North Korea, and he really does not have a lot of bona fides, and what is worrisome is that he needs to kind of rattle the sabers, so to speak, in order to get the military to stand behind him. But if he rattles too hard, he may well cause problems that force the country to take military action and force a response from the United States. So things are fairly scary there. I don't think we're at crisis mode yet, but we're certainly making preparations to deal with it. The United States has sent military assets into the region, as I've said, and the nations around North Korea, particularly Japan and South Korea, are on alert for possible action. Regarding our normal set of circumstances and topics on this show, there continue to be issues with discussions, negotiations with Iran concerning the nuclear program there. We'll talk with Yashar Irani about Yashar Vasef, who also goes by Yashar Irani, about the Iranian governmental situation and the nuclear program. And we'll talk, if we have a little bit of time, about the letter signed by 100 American Jewish leaders that was sent to Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, that was organized by Israel Policy Forum, which considers itself a centrist organization, but it's actually more on the left. And the letter signed by these 100 leaders is almost exclusively on the left. Some of them significantly so. And the letter urges Benjamin Netanyahu to work with Secretary Kerry and the Obama administration to advance the peace process and essentially to try to incentivize the Palestinians to return to the negotiating table. And we can talk more about that. We've certainly discussed the necessity of a two-state solution and a workable peace process. The question is whether or not what is being proposed by the Israel Policy Forum letter and the American leaders, including the executive leadership of the reform movement, is a reasonable path to pursue. We'll talk about that and more over the next hour.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershad.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I am joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein of the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines. And later on in our show, we're going to be joined by Yashar Vasef, who also goes by Yashar Irani, who is the executive director of the UN Association of Iowa. And he will be talking with us about Iran and what life is like in Iran and a little bit about the governmental situation in Iran. The big issue of the day, Mark, as I talked during our World in 5 Minutes segment, is North Korea. And North Korea has for a very long time had a practice of making a lot of noise and making a lot of threats in the hope of getting something in return.
And it's usually gotten something in return, in terms of usually food products, probably.
I mean, the problem with North Korea is they don't have a functional anything other than military, is what it sounds like.
That's right.
They not only don't have a functional economy, they don't have even functional farming there, and they have needed huge amounts of international aid in order to keep their people from starving in large numbers. And the saber rattling that's going on here. I saw this article from Christian Science Monitor, which I thought was fairly interesting. Can the United States trust North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to act rationally? And this article talks about actually restarting his nuclear program. Well, they've already started. they just had a nuclear test the other day. It's kind of a question of what kind of nuclear program we're restarting here. But the question is whether or not Mr. Kim is a rational actor. And what's interesting to me is that we have, to a certain extent, the same questions about Ahmadinejad.
There's, I think, a difference here. I think the Iranian regime has far greater insight into the West and to American thought process than North Korea does. And there's some speculation that North Korea says what it says simply because it's really isolated in the world as a whole and doesn't understand that its rhetoric is ridiculous in the first place.
Well, it's entirely possible, and this I think is part of what really gets people afraid, is that it's entirely possible that Kim Jong-un doesn't have most of the relevant information, that he really doesn't understand what's going on, and that the threats that are being made by North Korea are based on misinformation given to him, potentially by military leaders who want him to ratchet up the rhetoric in order to solidify their power. Right. That this Kim Jong-un may have absolutely no idea what he's doing. I don't know.
Now, periodically over the last number of years, there have been attacks from North Korea on South Korean interests to begin with. So it's nothing new. This is really just the latest incident of this. And we hear that North Korea has severed one of its last remaining commercial ties with South Korea as well. So they're intent on doing something.
Yeah, it's very problematic, and what we found is that nations that isolate themselves suddenly find themselves friends of Iran. And last month, North Korea conducted a nuclear missile test. We know they conducted a nuclear missile test. There was even seismic activity and all of that monitored, and it was a fairly substantial test. And the United States believes that it was a uranium nuclear test. And the significance of that is that the North Korean program to this point has been using plutonium. And they've had a plutonium-based nuclear program. The uranium-based nuclear program was in Iran.
So essentially you're saying that Iran's proxy in this development of their potential is being carried out by North Korea.
The belief is, and there is evidence that the Iranian nuclear scientists were present at the North Korean test, and there's some belief that the Iranians helped the North Koreans make this uranium-based weapon, and that they wanted to see if their plans for such a weapon would work. And that this test was conducted in North Korea, which wanted to do something to get attention and to ratchet up the military pressure. And it also benefited Iran by giving them free opportunity to test their nuclear weapons technology. Oh. So the situation that we've got right now in North Korea is this is a country that has spread its technology around the world. It does whatever it can to get money, and its only real commodity is weapons and weapons technology, including nuclear weapons technology.
David, do you think that the Syrians, when they were potchking around with nuclear weapons, were employing North Korean technology as well?
The belief is yes, that their nuclear reactor is based on North Korean technology.
Which was destroyed in 2007 in September of that year by
the Israelis. So this stuff has been monitored for quite some time. I think that the West hoped that Kim Jong-un would come in and kind of change things, but it's a little too much to expect out of somebody who's been sheltered
first
and
of all,
new
new
to
to
office.
power.
He doesn't have a whole lot of authority to do much.
Was he an only child, David?
That I don't know.
I think so.
That I don't know. He may well have been.
Okay.
But the hope at this point is that what we're seeing is just the same old, and that North Korea is just rattling the saber to try to get something, and that as soon as we're able to give them something, they will, calm down. If that's food, I think we'll feel better about it. If it's some other concession, I think we've got a problem. Yes. I don't think the understanding about North Korea here is that they're going to rattle the saber constantly, and therefore it's not going to help to make any concessions because they'll just rattle the saber again and ask for more.
The underlying problem is that the United States at one juncture promised not to let North Korea build a nuclear weapon. And the fact that it has a nuclear weapon certainly puts more pressure on the United States to live up to its promise that it will not let Iran develop an atomic bomb.
Yes, I mean, so our attempts, our attempt to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is largely based on the threat that we'll do something about it. And North Korea is a living example that won't happen.
Didn't work.
And that's really that's one of the major concerns that the Israelis have for sure, is that the United States can say all at once, but if it doesn't actually do anything, then you're going to see Iran getting a nuclear weapon just like North Korea got nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
You are seeing in North Korea, and this I think is where we get a little bit more scary, in that there have been defections of small units of North Korean troops to China, and China sent them back because China doesn't want to destabilize North Korea. And if you have large numbers of soldiers defecting, then you really will destabilize
China's not been a terrible help in any one of the geographic zones it's involved with, has it been?
You don't think China's helpful? No, China's definitely not helpful. So just briefly, we have Yashar Vasef joining us in just a couple of minutes here. And I'll let Yashar do a brief introduction of his story and what he does. But Yashar has worked with us on Sudan advocacy. He does a lot of work with refugees. And one of the things I'll give Yashar a little bit of opportunity to talk about is that there's a refugee program at the University of Iowa that's this weekend that's really going to be a spectacular program. Unfortunately, there's a lot of programming in the Jewish community here in Des Moines, and I'm not able to attend that. But there really will be some wonderful speakers coming up at that program this weekend in Iowa City, and I hope that people will be able to join. And then I don't know how much time we'll have to talk about the letter sent to Netanyahu, but 100 American Jewish leaders have 100 prominent, it says here in the Haaretz article, American Jews have sent a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urging him to work closely with Secretary Kerry to devise pragmatic initiatives consistent with Israel's security needs, which would represent Israel's readiness to make painful territorial sacrifices for the sake of peace.
Well, on the face of it, because the letter says it needs to be consistent with Israel's security needs, it sounds like a very common thing for people to say we should go ahead and try to find a pragmatic solution working with Secretary Kerry. That's on the face of it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that that the situation of trying to find a pragmatic way to move forward is a good thing. Where I have a little bit of difficulty is with the idea that the sole purpose of this is to get the Palestinians to come back to the negotiating table. I tend to believe that the Israelis have demonstrated numerous times a willingness to negotiate, and until there's some belief that the Palestinians have something new to bring to the discussion, not just the Israelis have something new to bring to the discussion, I'm not sure that there's any way for peace to move forward. And we've talked also about the fact of who represents the people. These are things that we'll talk about much more in the future. Yashar, I believe, is on Skype with us now, so we'll move to our Skype. Ryan, is that right?
No, we're having some audio problems.
You're having some audio problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so
let's continue.
We'll continue to talk.
You know, the people who apparently have signed on to the letter, although neither of us have seen a list, are reputable people. Rabbi Jacobs, who's the head of the Reform Movement, and he signed it as the head of the Reform Movement, and Eric Yaffe, the former head of the Reform Movement, for which I think we both have a great deal of respect. Well,
and there are a number of other benefactors: Charles Bronfman, Danny Abraham, Lester Crown, Stanley Gold, former U.S. Undersecretary of Defense Dov Zakheim, former U.S. Congressman Mel Levine, former AIPAC Executive Director Tom Dine. So we're dealing with a reasonable list of leaders. Now, these leaders tend to be on the political left for sure, but the issue here is that there's a desire, I think, to try to build some momentum for peace, and this is not a bad thing. I mean, we've talked about in the past that a two-state solution is really essential in some fashion. I think the problem is the momentum is not necessary on the Jewish side. I don't think the momentum is necessary on the Israeli side. I think the momentum is necessary on the Palestinian side.
I think the question, though, is whether the American administration wants to make the best use of this time, and regardless of whose side the momentum on is, to do something positive. You know, among the statements I read there was, so if indeed Israel builds goodwill, it puts the pressure on Abbas to respond.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that the only way this is really going to work, if you had told me that we're gonna rally behind, have the Israelis rally behind peace and promote peace, and the goal of that is to get the Palestinians to rally behind peace and promote peace to the Abbas administration, I would say, let's try it. You know, if you told me that you were going to have Palestinians marching through the streets of Ramallah and Gaza City, and that they were going to demand that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas negotiate peace with Israel, yeah, I think that's a reasonable goal. Yeah. If you're going to say that the goal of pressuring Israel to make concessions is to get the Palestinian Authority to consider coming to the negotiating table to think about making peace, only to have it soundly rejected by Hamas and then by the majority of the Palestinians in the West Bank, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. It's kind of like saying we've got a good driver in the car, the engine's not working, let's have him steer it in the right direction and we'll get hundreds of people to try to push the car up the hill. I mean, why don't we fix the engine first?
Well, again, it's, I think, a matter of momentum, that the president put a whole lot into going to Israel and creating some sense of momentum. And there may be some blame cast around if that momentum is squandered.
Well,
regardless of if it's realistic or not.
And we talked last week about the idea that a lot has to happen in the peace process, and that the president's visit to the region probably was not primarily about the peace process, but was about but was instead about what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Turkey, and potentially Iran, and that the peace process was cover for that.
Well, he spent enough time publicly talking about the peace process anyway.
Okay, so we've got Yashar Vasef joining us actually on the phone, it looks like, rather than on Skype, because I guess the Skype's not working. We couldn't get the sound to work. Is that what happened? Okay, so Yashar is joining us on the phone here. Yashar, are you there?
I'm here. How are you two doing?
Hi, nice to hear from you.
Good to hear from you. We're glad to have you on the show. So I gave a brief introduction about you, but I guess I'm looking at myself on the video here wearing the headphones. I look a little silly, but give us a little bit of your background and then kind of talk about, I guess, your understanding of Iran and the government in Iran.
Sure. Well, I was born in Iran in the early 1980s in the midst of the Iran-Iraq War. My family ended up fleeing that war during its last year. I relocated to Turkey for a couple years, and finally we were blessed to attain American visas. I've kind of jumped around here in the States, but ended up in Iowa, attended the University of Iowa, and didn't really identify with my Iranian background, to be frank, until my senior year of high school, when my father pulled me aside and told me the story of his hardship as a political prisoner who was tortured in an Iranian prison. And that really changed my life perspective, and I became more active through my studies. And here I am today working with the United Nations Association. And to answer your second part about kind of what's happening in Iran today, the feel on the ground, I don't think the regime will view 2013 as a good year for the government. As we know, the sanctions are crippling. The currency is devalued tremendously, and with an upcoming election this summer, there's a lot of tension in the air, and I do believe the regime is trying to play this very closely. There is very slim margin for error for them, and right now the big debate is who can run and who can't run. They're really looking for insiders to maintain the supreme leader's grip on power.
Well, how many people are going to be running for president, do you believe?
Usually, once they're vetted through the Guardian Council, which is an unelected body of clerics, very powerful within the Iranian political infrastructure, we'll have something like a handful or less, or fewer. And what we're expecting this time around is for the Supreme Leader to indirectly give his approval for the candidates. As you may know, the Supreme Leader in Ahmadinejad, there's been growing tensions there, and they don't want another Ahmadinejad in power. They view Ahmadinejad as a threat to the clerical establishment. So I'm expecting anywhere from 3 to 5, and if no one gets 50% of the vote, they'll have a runoff election.
And do you think any of those candidates will be more traditionally liberal than expected?
There's one that comes to mind that folks are talking about, Eskandar Mashe, who is actually an in-law of Ahmadinejad. He's kind of been Ahmadinejad's chief aide behind the scenes. What's interesting about him is his relation to Ahmadinejad. You know, their children are married. So, but he himself has come out actually and said, and has been reprimanded for saying that Iran is actually a friend of Israel. He wants to renew relations with the West. He's kind of seen as a wild card, and there's speculation as to whether or not he'll be allowed to run.
Or to live afterwards.
Yeah, if he is allowed to run, there's a lot of folks out there that think he can make a sneak run, and he's viewed in many quarters as an outsider. And I know that after the rigged election in 2009, Ahmadinejad wanted to prop him up as the vice president, and the clerical establishment quickly put an end to that. but he's seen as the wild card that he's openly embracing Persian culture, which predates Islam, and there's a lot of speculation that he is going to try to reform Iran, however he views that reform fit.
Now, was this an arranged marriage by Ahmadinejad to try to consolidate power? I mean, is that part of how their kids got married here?
My understanding is that it's not an arranged marriage. Arranged marriages aren't too frequent in Iran. That's something that I'd have to look up. But my understanding, from what I've seen, I haven't seen any mention of an arranged marriage. And the thing with Ahmadinejad, too, is that there's question as to what his true beliefs are. He's very fiery. He's very controversial, to say the least. But there is speculation as to how he really feels. And a lot of people believe that he is trying to also separate mosque and state, put an end to the supreme leader's reign, which is something that we haven't seen speculated before in such a transparent manner in Iranian politics.
Well, would the mullahs be willing to allow him to run if that's what he was thinking? I mean, isn't that one of the things that happened last time, is that the mullahs didn't like some of the candidates and therefore didn't let them run in the election?
Right. So the question for the mullahs right now is their big thing with this upcoming election is they still want to maintain some sort of semblance of legitimacy. So the question that the Supreme Leader and the Guardian Council are faced with is, do we let this man run and have a bit of a more legitimate election, or do we run the risk of having a major boycott or having, domestically the election viewed as a sham, with hand-picked candidates? So that's the question they're facing, and there's some analysis out there saying that Eskandar Mashe can make his own moves within the regime as well. He's been there since the beginning. Most of these folks like Ahmadinejad, who are kind of in firm opposition to some of the clerical establishment, they've all been there since the revolution, and it's essentially insiders going after each other. So they each have different tools within the regime that they can use to for persuasive means. But my gut feeling is they won't allow him to run, but I've seen speculation out there that they think at the end the Supreme Leader is a bit more pragmatic than people give credit for, and he will allow Mashe to run.
Now, Yashar, you make a cogent argument for taking a different approach with Iran. Can you outline that, please? Yeah,
this sounds, to many of the folks I talk to, it sounds very counterintuitive. But I'm one of the opinion that, our greatest asset with Iran is the people of Iran. They're, whatever you want to define pro-West as, but they've been defined as more pro-West than many of their neighbors in the region. And my opinion is that the sanctions are actually counterproductive. They allow the regime to scapegoat their economic shortcomings. It doesn't isolate the regime. What it's actually doing is isolating the country. So when we have these kind of sanctions that are absolutely crippling, the currency is devalued by 65% or more since last year. The people who are actually getting hurt from this, in my view, are the mom and pop shops. A lot of those folks are taking the heat from the sanctions because the regime has found ways to find other means of revenue. And so I think the regime will allow their people to starve before they would be willing to change. And I think in many ways the sanctions has moved forward the nuclear program. It's put the regime in a spot where they'll be seen as politically weak if they cave in to Western demands. So in my view, I think what should be done is a lifting of the sanctions, and much like what we did with China under Nixon, is renewing economic trade, cultural exchange, and I think what that does actually is isolates the regime from the people, because then we'll see the regime as the entity in this game that does not want to sit down and talk with the West.
Do you see, what's the status of the nuclear program as you perceive it from this distance? Or do you believe there is a nuclear program to begin with?
I certainly do, and I certainly believe that they are in the midst of perhaps weaponizing that program. There's been, a lot of talk about whether or not the regime views the bomb as allowable under Shia doctrine. Rafsanjani went on 60 Minutes back, I believe, in the late 1990s and told Christopher Wallace that, it's a sin in Islam to have the nuclear bomb. Ayatollah Khomeini back in the 1980s issued a fatwa calling nuclear weapons as a sin in Shia doctrine. But I certainly believe that they are moving towards the weaponization of their program. I think it's a very dangerous situation. And, if you ask the common Iranian on the street, even those opposed to the regime, they view the nuclear program as a source of national pride. So it's a very tricky situation. And my personal speculation would be that there is a weaponized program. I know the IAEA, the UN, has come out, and they've been a bit concerned about some of the things Iran is not allowing them to do as far as access. So in my view, I do believe they're moving toward a weapons program.
Well, we'll talk more with Yashar Vasef, the Executive Director of the UN Association of Iowa, right after this break.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drink, dance, party. Kitty's is the ultimate dance club in Des Moines. A huge dance floor with room to move, 3 bars to keep your drinks full, and kickin' DJs playing all your favorite dance music. At Kitty's, we've always got your birthday party planned with Birthday Fridays. That's right, when your birthday rolls around, there's only one place to go. Gather up your friends and head to Kitty's, where you drink free on the Friday of your birthday week. Find out more about Birthday Fridays at kittiesusa.com. Kitty's, all kinds of people, all kinds of music, all kinds of fun.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein, and we are joined on the phone by Yashar Vasef from the UN Association of Iowa, and we've been talking about Iran. Before we talk more, I'd like to thank Dr. Ronald Bergman and Bergman Folkers Cosmetic Surgery and Spa for their sponsorship of my show and enabling us to bring you information and help you understand the events of the world. So, Mark, you had a question for Yashar.
Yeah. Yashar, do you think, as has been speculated, that the Iranian regime is working with North Korea?
I think there is some, there's no doubt that there is some sort of relationship there. As far as, close cooperation, I'm not exactly sure. My personal speculation would be that it's pretty likely Iran, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Iran has been very close of late with many regimes, and even, there was a recent Al-Qaeda operative that was arrested, and he apparently was hiding in Iran, which is really shocking to a lot of people because, as we may know, Iran and Al-Qaeda have a very, very tense relationship in the past. So I think Iran at this point is feeling the grip of the sanctions, and I think they're trying to make friends anywhere they can in their opposition to the West. The
concern, of course, is with any sort of a breakthrough in the nuclear weapons program that would be undetected by the West. And do you think that's a valid concern, or is everything on the table?
Well, there are some sites that we're concerned about that are underground, and we keep hearing each year that this might be the year that they have the bomb. But it finally does feel from a lot of the analysis that we're getting closer and closer to a potential Iranian acquisition of the bomb and perhaps a test. And this is something that a lot of people will say that even if they have the bomb, they're many years, perhaps decades away from the capacity to successfully deliver any sort of weapon on an intercontinental basis. But I think the main concern is not exactly that, but the potential arms race that this may brew within the region, which, as we know through the Arab Spring, is already quite a volatile region. And as far as Iran's secret program and what we know and what we don't know, really what we have is what's been presented. So it's really hard to speculate, but I think the thing to keep an eye on is the IAEA, who's on the ground, who's trying to gain access to some of these sites, and they're growing increasingly worried about what they're seeing. So I think that's a place to keep an eye on as to how far along Iran may be with their program.
Yashar, can you tell us a bit about the Jewish population in Iran?
Yeah, Iran had quite a sizable Jewish population before the 1979 election. By some figures, up to a couple 100,000 Jews. But as of today, there's 30,000 Jews roughly in Iran, which is still the largest Jewish population in the Middle East outside of Israel. And there's a deep Orthodox tradition. I was able to visit a synagogue on my last trip to Iran, and it's very interesting. Alcohol is illegal, but it is legal for Jewish practices in Iran. And also, they're given a seat in the Iranian parliament, which the regime does not do for a few other religions. But there is a rich, deep tradition of Judaism in Iran, and my understanding is the Torah has quite a few stories referencing Jews in Persia.
Yeah, Yashar, I know we don't have a whole lot more time on the show, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the refugee program at University of Iowa this weekend, and what the UN Association of Iowa does.
Sure. So starting this evening through Saturday, the University of Iowa Center for Human Rights is hosting what's called Refugees in the Heartland. It's a conference for refugees from all over the Midwest, in Central America, who are congregating to discuss refugee issues. There will be Sudanese representation as well. I know I've worked with the two of you on some of the South Sudanese diaspora campaigns, and if anyone's in the Iowa City area, I highly recommend a visit. Alec Weck, a international supermodel, will be here, who is very concerned about what's happening along the Sudan-South Sudan border as a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, and a few representatives from the UN Refugee Agency will also be here. And if anyone's interested, you can go to the website for the UI Center for Human Rights, and the conference schedule will be there. And as far as Iowa UNA, we're involved in a myriad of topics that try to engage Iowans globally. Primarily these days, we're working on a lot of our global health campaigns for clean water, polio and measles eradication, malaria prevention, and just any international issue that we find Iowans are interested in discussing. And if anyone's interested in learning more about Iowa UNA, you're free to visit our website, iowauna.org.
Wonderful, thank you, Yashar. What was the website again for the refugee program?
I don't have the website offhand. If you go to the UI Center for Human Rights website, it should be right there front and center.
Okay.
Or you can Google Refugees in the Heartland, and that should show up.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think you've given us a good insight on Iran, and contributed information that we don't normally hear. It's nice to hear from somebody who's got kind of inside information on what's going on there, and we appreciate it. So thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
And we'll take a short break.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
Drink, dance, party. Kitty's is the ultimate dance club in Des Moines. A huge dance floor with room to move, 3 bars to keep your drinks full, and kickin' DJs playing all your favorite dance music. At Kitty's, we've always got your birthday party planned with Birthday Fridays. That's right, when your birthday rolls around, there's only one place to go. Gather up your friends and head to Kitty's, where you drink free on the Friday of your birthday week. Find out more about Birthday Fridays at kittiesusa.com. Kitty's, all kinds of people, all kinds of music, all kinds of fun.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein. And we just heard from Yashar Vasef from the UN Association of Iowa, and we thank him for joining us. Next week on our show, we're honored to have Carl Wilkins, who was the person who stayed behind in Rwanda during the genocide, has written all about it, speaks all around the country. And the United to End Genocide Fellows are named Carl Wilkins Fellows in his honor. Wonderful speaker. He'll be coming to Des Moines April 20th, actually speaking at my congregation at the temple in the evening. I hope you'll be able to be here with us for that. It's going to begin at 7:30. Mark, we had one other topic that we didn't get to in the show, and we'll talk just for the next couple of minutes because I have to go teach at 10 o'clock, but rock throwing.
There's been an increase in violence within the West Bank over the last 6 months. Part of it was possibly associated with the visit of President Obama, but it's spinning out of control as well. There are a number of incidents. There was a Palestinian policeman convicted just the other day of the murder of an Israeli man and baby by rock throwing, and it's been documented that the rocks are now being thrown on a regular basis against ambulances.
Yeah, and it's not just rocks. There are also fire bombs and Molotov cocktails and other things being thrown. But, sticks and stones can break bones, and breaking bones can start wars. I mean, that's the simple reality is that there are people out there who are throwing rocks because they believe that using violence is the only means to advance the cause against Israel. Now, if you believe the cause against Israel is an honorable two-state solution of peace and security between two peoples, you may say, well, of course they have to advocate, they have to do violence and move the process forward. But if you believe that their ultimate goal is the eradication of the nation of Israel, then this is not going to end with any kind of a peace agreement, one. And two, the idea that Israel needs to maintain peace and security after whatever happens is simply not going to be advanced by the process of rock throwing.
In addition, it seems that the Palestinians are using younger and younger people to try to confront the Israelis on the ground in the West Bank, and that's child abuse, essentially.
Well, they're certainly allowing them. I mean, whether or not they're using them and they're bringing them to the front or not, I don't know. But you certainly have younger siblings, it appears, of the older rock throwers. And what happens is when the Israeli police respond as they need to, then these younger people get involved in the conflict, in the confrontation. And this is just not okay. I mean, it's not okay on any level. But it's really not okay for the international community to say, these are kids, the Israeli military can't touch them. That's not true. People participating in violence are participating in violence, period. Now, for sure, you want to treat children with a little bit more of kid gloves than you would adults, but it's important to understand that when the other side is exploiting children for precisely the purpose of either making it more difficult to stop what's going on or to make the other side worse, look worse for having to do what they would normally do in order to stop the process, then the blame is not on Israel for how it handles the situation, but on the Palestinians themselves for jeopardizing the children. It's much like putting a military target in the middle of a civilian population. The expectation is that the opposing military has the choice then of either doing what it needs to do militarily and endangering civilians, in which case you then argue that they've harmed civilians, or they don't do anything at all and your military target is secure. The idea of having young children participate in rock-throwing mobs as a way to secure the older children or as a way to make Israel look worse for acting simply is not tolerable. And it's not that it's not tolerable from the Israeli side that Israel can't do anything. It's not tolerable that the Palestinians are allowing it. The Palestinian police, if they really want peace, need to stop the rock throwing and the violence, and they need to come to the negotiating table. We're sitting here looking at a situation in which the Palestinian Authority has very clearly decided to allow or promote rock throwing instead of coming to the negotiating table. And those who believe in the peace process or want the peace process to move forward need to say, no, you can't do that. Come to the negotiating table. Right, Mark?
Absolutely.
I think that is very simply the solution here, and the argument that's coming from some in the peace community that these people are throwing off the yoke of the oppressor
because they have no other way to make their voice heard.
Because they have no other way to make their voice heard is simply wrong. They have a way to make their voice heard. It's called coming to the negotiating table. The whole international community is sitting here and listening to them, and they have a media. So what's the issue here? They could make their voice heard. Everybody knows what their voice is. Why do they have to jeopardize the safety and health of innocent children in order to make their point? I mean, because they're deliberately doing that, people. I mean, there's no doubt that by allowing children, knowingly allowing children to participate in these kind of events, the Palestinian Authority is sanctioning the jeopardizing of children in a military conflict because they feel that they can get more out of that than they could at the negotiating table or through diplomatic means.
This goes hand in hand, unfortunately, with the inculcation of hate directed towards children's education and the broadcasting of that on the public media within the West Bank.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about all of the various rock-throwing conflicts. We'll hear more about Syria in the coming weeks. Hopefully, we will not hear a whole lot of worsening of the North Korea situation in the days ahead. Mark, you got one final thing to say here before we...
Yes, there was a person within the Israeli jails who passed away the other day from cancer. And the Palestinians used that as a pretext for rioting again.
Yeah, everything seems to be a pretext for rioting or some sort of violence. When you've got groups in the Palestinian Authority who want, in the Palestinian Authority and certainly Hamas, that want to sabotage any peace discussions by promoting violence. And then you've got other ones who want to use the violence to promote the peace discussion. So in that case, you've got two different people trying to use violence to promote activity, and it's problematic on both sides. And if that sounds like it's contradictory, it's because it is. You have people who are trying to promote a new intifada instead of peace discussions, and you got people who are trying to promote getting the Israelis to come to the table and make concessions, or at least getting the international community to pressure Israel to come to the table and make concessions. Anyway, I have to go teach at 10 o'clock today about anti-Semitism, the enduring hatred, and we will be back next week with Carl Wilkins. The show this month will be at 8:30. We'll start at 8:30 in the morning every week. Thanks again to Dr. Ronald Bergman and Bergman Folkers Cosmetic Surgery and Spa for their support of this show, and thanks to Mark Finkelstein for joining me in the studio, and Yashar Vasef for joining us on the phone. Hope you have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.